The First Snowfall by James Russell Lowell, 1818 to 1891. The snow had begun in the gloaming, and busily all the night had been heaping field and highway with silence deep and white. Every pine and fir and hemlock wore ermine too dear for an earl, and the poorest twig on the elm-tree was ridged inch deep with pearl. From sheds new roofed with Carrara came Chanticleer's muffled crow. The stiff rails were softened to swan's down, and still fluttered down the snow. I stood and watched by the window the noiseless work of the sky, and the sudden flurries of snowbirds like brown leaves whirling by. I thought of a mound in sweet Auburn, where a little headstone stood, how the flakes were folding it gently, as did robins the babes in the woods. Up spoke our own little Mabel, saying, "Father, who makes it snow?" And I told of the good All-Father, who cares for us here below. And again I looked at the snowfall, and thought of the leaden sky that arched o'er our first great sorrow, when that mound was heaped so high. I remembered the gradual patience that fell from that cloud-like snow, flake by flake healing and hiding the scar of our deep-plunged woe. And again to the child I whispered, the snow that husheth all, "Darling, the merciful Father alone can make it fall." Then with eyes that saw not I kissed her, and she kissing back could not know that my kiss was given to her sister, folded close under deepening snow. Okay, this is a poem by James Russell Lowell. He was an American. He was born into a very wealthy family in Massachusetts. He came from Cambridge, Massachusetts, and he went to Harvard University. And let's see, he was a romantic poet. He was considered he was one of the fireside poets. These were American poets, or the first American poets to start to rival the fame of the traditional British poets. Now he was he was involved in the movement to abolish slavery, and he used poetry to express his anti-slavery views, and he worked as the editor of a newspaper, and then later he became an ambassador, and he went to all sorts of places as an ambassador. Now let's see, The First Snowfall. What's this about? Well, this poem is about the loss of a child, the death of a child. Now this is about his from his own experience, and he was married and he had 4 children. However, of those four children, 3 of them died at a very early age, and the only one to survive was Mabel. And it's said that he after the death of his first daughter, he was suicidal. And this poem is about the death of his first daughter. And he sets the scene with the snow falling. And he's looking out of the window, and the snow is falling, and the snow is falling. And there's this almost this silence. And his daughter Mabel is standing beside him. And she asks, where does the snow come from? And he says that God sends the snow. And I get the feeling that this poem, it's saying that he feels that perhaps it's God's will that his first daughter died, and he's thinking about her, and this is part of this Victorian preoccupation about death, and there's this image of the snow covering the grave, and maybe there's this hope for eternal rest, and maybe there's also this healing power of nature, looking at the beauty of the landscape, the beauty of the snow, and it's this whole poem is focusing just on a few moments, looking out of the window, looking at the snow with his daughter Mabel next to him. So the snow had begun in the gloaming. Okay, the gloaming is the twilight. Gloaming is when the sun goes down. So in the evening. And busily all the night had been heaping field and highway with a silence deep and white. So when the sun went down, it began to snow, and the snow had been getting deeper and deeper and deeper all over the field and the road, and everything was white and everything was silent. Every pine and fir and hemlock wore ermine too dear for an earl. So we've now got this lovely metaphor. Ermine is a white fur, like it's an animal with white fur like a mink, and an earl would wear ermine, and it's very expensive. And this is a metaphor saying all of the pines, the fir trees and the hemlock, everything was covered in ermine, was covered in the white of the snow. And the poorest twig on the elm-tree was ridged inch deep with pearl. And even the twigs on the elm tree, the poorest, they were an inch deep with the pearls of snow. And here we have another metaphor, the beauty of the snow. So he's calling the snow like ermine and like pearls. From sheds new roofed with Carrara come Chanticleer's muffled crow. So Carrara marble from Italy is this white marble that they make, that the Romans and I think the Greeks used to make statues out of. So he's looking out and he can see sheds, animal sheds, and it looks like they have been, the roofs have Carrara marble on their roofs, and he can hear the crow of the Chanticleer, the rooster crowing. The stiff rails were softened to swan's down, and still fluttered down the snow. So he can see a farm, and the rails of the farm, the fences, these which are made of hard wood, they have been softened down to the feathers, the white feathers of swans, and the snow is still fluttering down. And he's describing this beautiful natural scene. I stood and watched by the window the noiseless work of the sky. So when it snows, all of the sounds are deadened. It changes the way the world sounds, and it's silence, and in silence it's snowing and snowing. and the sudden flurries of snowbirds, like brown leaves whirling by. So he's now got a simile where he says the birds flying by, they look like the brown leaves of autumn being blown away. I thought of a mound sweet in Auburn, where a little headstone stood, how the flakes were folding it gently, as did robins the babe in the wood. So I thought of a mound in sweet Auburn. Well, Auburn is a reddish brown colour, but I'm wondering why he's put it in a capital letter, and I looked it up, and there is also a town called Auburn in Massachusetts, which is not so far from where he lived, and I'm not sure if Auburn is referring to where the grave is, or if he's just personifying this red colour, and maybe she had auburn hair. So I thought of the mound of earth, where a little headstone stood. So this is a grave. How the flakes were folding it gently, the flakes of snow were steadily covering it, as did robins, the babes in the wood. Now, Babes in the Wood is an old traditional story, and the robins look after these children that are lost in the wood. I think it's their uncle is trying to kill them to get their money. So the flakes of snow are covering them, like the robins are covering the babes in the wood. Up spoke our own little Mabel, and this is his daughter Mabel, his only surviving child, saying, "Father, who makes it snow?" And I told of the good All-Father who cares for us here below. And he told her, so she asked, who made it snow? And he's telling her about God who looks after the people on earth. And again I looked at the snowfall and thought of the leaden sky that arched o'er our first great sorrow, when that mound was heaped so high. And he looks again at the snow, and he thinks of the dark grey lead colour of the sky that is over his first great sorrow, and our first great sorrow, the first great sorrow of him and his wife is the death of this daughter. And this great sorrow is when the daughter was buried, when the mound was heaped high with earth, and now this mound is being heaped with snow. I remembered the gradual patience that fell from that cloud-like snow, flake by flake, healing and hiding the scar of our deep-plunged woe. And here this is a metaphor with the snow falling, and the snow is covering the grave, and it's covering his sadness, he's covering the scars of his daughter's death, in the same way as the earth was put on her grave and it was slowly heaped on her grave, and this is hiding the woe, the sadness, and this deep scar within him. And again to the child I whispered, the snow that husheth all, darling, the merciful Father alone can make it fall. And he whispered to the child, to Mabel, and he said, the snow that makes everything quiet, only God can make that snow fall. Then with eyes that saw not, I kissed her. So he kissed Mabel, but he didn't see her, he wasn't seeing her. And she kissing back could not know, and she kissed him back, but she couldn't know that my kiss was given to her sister, folding close under the deepening snow. And he kissed Mabel, but this kiss was really for his dead daughter who was buried under the snow, who was buried under the earth. And he's seeing his dead daughter in Mabel, his live one. Very poignant and very sad reflection about loss and about how nature can make us feel, can help us to heal. But it's a deep sense of sadness, and this poem it's about death. So, the first Snowfall by James Russell Lowell.